Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to Podcast Handstand, the gymnastics podcast solely dedicated to the recreational gymnastics world. And I am your host, JR. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's Wednesday, January 10th. Hey, we are going global. Our podcast has now been listened to in 10 different countries. It's amazing and kind of mind-boggling to me that people all over are listening and getting feedback. Receiving that feedback from you has been especially rewarding. So thank you for those who've been sharing the podcast and continue to listen, and those who have subscribed. If you have not subscribed already, please do so. You can find me on all the socials. My handle is JR the Gymnastics Coach. You can find me on Instagram. I am on TikTok and Facebook, and I also have a YouTube channel, which now you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel. So check it out. I'm going to start using more visuals now that we're on YouTube, and I'm excited about some new things we're going to be adding. First, let's talk about last week's episode. I didn't get so much feedback, but comments from the topic, which was why you can be a great gymnastics coach even though you've never done gymnastics. And really, it boils down to, are you going to become a student of the sport? That means, are you going to do everything you can to learn as much as you can and really allow people to give you corrections, and then you take those corrections and you apply them? That's what it's going to take. And for those who've commented and said that they really felt like they struggled with imposter syndrome, they never did gymnastics and sometimes feel weird about telling parents that they never did it, or maybe a coworker made them feel a certain way because they did not have that experience. Let me tell you, I said this last week, I'll say it one more time, that some of the best gymnastics coaches that I've ever known never did gymnastics, and some of the best gymnasts that I got were not very good coaches. So it goes both ways. So as long as you are working to improve every time you come into the gym, that's all we can really ask. We need good people in the sport of gymnastics. So continue doing what you're doing. If your kids are learning and having fun, then you are successful. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to today's subject, which is why gymnastics is a perfect sport for boys. Hey, it's perfect for anybody, boys or girls, but we're going to particularly talk about boys because in the past, and it's still true today, that gymnastics has been a female-driven sport. That means it's been more popular for females than males. And maybe there can be a couple different reasons why. We're not going to so much get into that, but we're going to talk about how gymnastics can really increase the skill level of your son, so as they move on to other sports, that they will continue to see success, and you can really see the value of placing them in gymnastics, especially at a younger age. So let's get to it. I love a list, as you guys know, and the first thing on my list is gymnastics improves motor skill and balance. Now, when the kids are young and they're in a preschool age class, both boys and girls will be working on the balance beam, and that's great for building that center of gravity, that balance point that's going to allow you to stand on one leg and stand on the other leg and be able to walk across really small, narrow objects. And that is great because later on, when they go on to a sport like football, or they go on to a sport like martial arts, having a nice, strong base and balance is going to be really important for those sports and the success that comes with having that core strength and just be able to get in and hold yourself into a nice, strong position. Motor skills, we go to vault and we train hopping, skipping, jumping, all the different footwork skills that you'd be seeing in sports that involve running. So it really builds those foundational skills that's going to be important for many sports that they'll be doing later on. Number two, this is a great thing for injury prevention. And when I say injury prevention, specifically how to fall, which is so important. Now, through life, there's going to be instances outside of sports where we fall. And if we know how to fall and absorb the weight of that fall, then we're going to be less likely to get injured. If we're talking about specific sports like football where you're being tackled, martial arts, I'm going to go even out on the limb and say rock climbing, falling from the wall onto, yes, they have mats if you're in a rock climbing gym, but learning how to roll out of that without hurting yourself is so important. Number three on my list of why gymnastics is a great sport for boys, it provides the foundation for discipline and work ethic. And this is for all kids everywhere. We want to be able to teach these kids how to set goals and to have the discipline to work toward and follow through, and what it feels like when you have the success of learning something or doing well, and also the disappointment that comes when you don't quite have it and you still have to work on it. It's really great. And that's going to set them up for so many other things in life, whether it's their education or when they get out of school and they're looking for a job, they interview for a job and maybe they don't get it. Like learning to deal with all of those situations that comes with success and failure and working toward a goal, super important. It can start with gymnastics. Number four, it increases your child's coachability. And wouldn't we all like to have kids that are able to take feedback from their coaches, their teachers, their bosses? Set them up for success. This is a great way to, at an early age, allow them to be told to do things by somebody besides their parents or their grandparents or their primary caregiver. Like I have always been amazed by the kids who come in at an early age and are able to absorb feedback and take it. They by nature, some folks are going to be a little more sensitive, but for those kids who are really sensitive to taking feedback and they wear their feelings on their shoulder, this is a great way to kind of work on that, because by the time they get into high school or college and they're dealing with professors, they go off in the workforce and they're dealing with bosses who aren't always going to be as sympathetic to somebody who's more sensitive. This kind of training is going to be great and it's going to really set them up for success. Number five on my list, this is really the most important one, right? It's because it's fun. Gymnastics is a great way for your son to come in and just let out a lot of energy by jumping on the trampoline, by hanging, by swinging. Jumping in the pit is always one of the favorites. I feel like gymnastics is one of those sports where a boy can come in and be as loud as he wants to be and as crazy as he wants to be. And then we can also work on getting him in to be that focused individual where he has to be on a certain event and really hone in that focus, because gymnastics can be very dangerous. But it's a place where we can really get wild for at least a period of time during class. Now, when we're talking about going from gymnastics to other sports, we have some sports particularly that we see a lot of migration to, and diving is one of them. Obviously, there's a lot of parity with the flipping and the twisting that we learn in gymnastics. They learn that in gymnastics. Diving can be something that becomes very natural. Also, we see like trampolinists. Trampoline is a part of gymnastics, but it is something that they can go from artistic gymnastics to a different realm where they can just be flipping and jumping on the trampoline. Another sport, particularly that I see a lot of folks go to, particularly boys, is pole vaulting. And because of the open close kipping action that you see in gymnastics, they carry that over to the technique they use to get over the bar. And then also wrestling is another really, really big one that I see. And it's just because they have just a mastery of their body control that they're able to be successful at that. And I will say that I've had a lot of my male gymnasts go on to be really good first basemen in baseball, because that flexibility that you could have can really benefit a first baseman. So it's really cool to be able to see the kids that come from gymnastics migrate into other sports and use that background and have their coaches go to the parents and say, oh my gosh, like I can tell this kid did gymnastics because the way he moves, and he just has a mastery of skills that the other boys just don't have. I will say that boys gymnastics has become more popular in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. And I think that can be attributed to shows like American Ninja Warrior. And also CrossFit has been one of those activities that grown men have kind of migrated towards, and they see the benefit of gymnastics because now they're learning things or trying to learn things that they would have learned in gymnastics had they done it. And I've had so many men say to me, man, I wish my parents would have put me in gymnastics when I was a kid, because this stuff would have been easier for me to learn, or I would have already have known how to do it. Now, let's talk about some actual data. On projectplay.org, I was able to find a study that showed the most popular sports with kids ages 6 to 12. Now, this is both a list of female and male participants, but I did want to set this up for another group of data that I'm going to share with you in a moment. So, in that 6 to 12-year-old age, I have basketball as the number one sport of kids, 14% playing basketball. Number two was baseball. Number three was soccer. Number four, tennis. And then number five, which I was actually really surprised, was golf. As we move to a study that focused only on boys and high school sport participants, we're going to see football now at the top of that list with right under a million people playing, 973,000 boys playing football in the US. At number two, track and field with just a little over 500,000. Number three was baseball. Number four was basketball at 481,000. And then rounding out the top five sports played by high school boys, soccer. It is worth pointing out that more high schools provided a basketball program with 23,519 high schools in the US with basketball programs. Fewer schools had football programs, but because football teams have more participants, more members on the team, that's why there are more boys playing football than basketball. I thought that was a really interesting. So the benefits of gymnastics can greatly affect boys as they move into other sports. You're really going to stand out because the type of training you did in gymnastics, it creates the strong balance, the coordination, and the ability. Those boys are going to be quicker. Their body awareness is going to be stronger and really unmatched. We haven't even talked about flexibility, where alone helps decrease injuries. And I can't stress enough how valuable gymnastics training can be for boys. Now, if we look at that list, we can see how gymnastics plays a really strong part in developing a strong base, strength, agility program for boys who go in to play these sports. We talked about football, how footwork and the really strong center can be a great skill set for someone who plays football. I did not mention the aggressiveness that we are taught in gymnastics. When we're going for a big skill, it's so important that we are aggressive. Hey, that carries on directly to football, knowing that I'm going to have to run as fast as I can into somebody. Hey, that can start with gymnastics. We talked about the benefits and the correlation between track and field because of all the footwork that you do. Basketball, baseball, soccer, all of those also could require a lot of footwork action, quick motor skills, center of gravity, just body awareness in general. Those boys who move on from gymnastics will stand out because the type of training that they do. They're working on flexibility, they're working on strength building, and they're working on static holds, that strict muscle strength that you learn when you're holding L seats or when you're doing chin hangs. All this stuff is going to be unmatched when you compare them to boys who did not do this. Overall, a coach is going to be able to see how a boy moves differently because he did gymnastics versus somebody who's never done gymnastics before. Overall, I hope you can see that gymnastics is this great activity that boys can do that's not only fun, but really sets them up for success later on. The boys that move on from gymnastics are going to stand out because the type of training that you do in gymnastics creates strong balance, coordination, agility, makes them quicker. They have better body awareness. And we haven't talked much about flexibility, but the more flexible you are, the less likely you're going to have a severe injury. So I can't stress enough how valuable gymnastics training can be for boys. Even if your kids are only in preschool gymnastics for a couple of years, they're going to get a lot of benefits out of that balance and that just awareness that is required in gymnastics. Okay, that's all we have for today's topic. I hope this episode really helped hit home that gymnastics is a wonderful, amazing, and beneficial sport for boys, girls too. But I hope that for the dads out there who are on the fence or haven't really considered gymnastics as a sport for their son, you reconsider because you're really only doing a solid benefit for your son by putting him in. And as he moves into other sports, I guarantee that his coaches and you will see the benefits of gymnastics. Until next time, I am JR, and I hope to hear from you on all the socials, and I hope you'll be back next week. So until then, everybody have a great week. We'll see you next time.